And right now, I think, oh, there are no viewers, so. Okay, we have a few people joining us.
Right.
Okay, awesome. 7 viewers and counting. So those of you who are on our YouTube live on the webinar event, we're expecting one more, Jeffrey. So if you could just bear with us, we're going to start momentarily. Thank you. I wish I had music for everybody. I'm just streaming it from my phone.
Somebody sing.
Pick a song.
Mariah Carey.
Oh man. Oh, that's Pong. I don't know any Mariah Carey's off the top of my head. Oh, Sweet Fantasy Baby.
Pong is warming up his voice, I'm sure.
But I mean, we can give it 2 more minutes, and then we can start. I'm pretty sure he's going to be hopping on. There's a lot of technical difficulties happening, but yep, everybody just hang tight. And for those of you on, feel free to use the live chat too. If you're on the YouTube viewing channel, we'll be also taking questions for the end of the webinar on the chat room as well. Just to let you know. And then we're also taking questions from the Facebook event. Okay, well, our team is gonna assist Jeff on his technical difficulty issues offline, so he'll join us whenever he's able to. But welcome everyone to UNAVSA's first webinar for Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month 2017, theme I Am. This event is called Breaking the Silence, and this is to kind of complement the civic engagement event that the Council of Regional Representatives had a couple weeks back. And it's just to go more in depth on certain, I guess, like resources and talk more into how you can be civically and politically engaged as a working professional. We're all aware of how, I guess, we're all aware of what it's like being civically engaged on a collegiate level, where we rally as students, we do marches and stuff, but how that experience is different when you're fully in the workforce and you're in your profession. What exactly does that entail when you're a working professional? Here with me today, we have really great speakers on our panel. I'm going to present Dan first. He's going to be facilitating tonight's event. And then we'll just go around the room and kind of get to know everybody through some short introductions. So Dan was a former UNAVSA president before I came on as secretary. He's really involved with politically and civically. He was also really active within the Midwest region. He's now living and residing in the Mid-Atlantic region. And now he's just working as a programmer, was it, Dan?
An analyst.
Analyst, okay. Well, I'll leave it to you to introduce the rest. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Vu. Happy to be here, everyone. This is, I believe, the first time I'm doing anything related to YouTube Live, so it's pretty interesting from a technology perspective. My role here tonight is to be the facilitator, so I will be kind of picking and probing and asking questions and just helping ensure that the conversation goes in many interesting directions. It's really our panelists that will be providing the meat of this conversation. As Vu said, I was formerly the president of UNAVSA. I was at one point in time really involved with UVSA and VSA and UNAVSA. Now that I'm 3, 4, 5, 6 years removed from all of it, I think I have an interesting perspective and insight into some of the challenges that I personally went through, kind of transitioning from being so involved with the Vietnamese community to focusing on my own career, and also now trying to become more politically involved. And so I have a lot of questions that I want to ask our panelists and dive into some of the strategies and some of the techniques that they've used and employed over the years to get where they're at. So enough about me. Want to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. I think for me, it would be interesting to know kind of 3 things. One, your involvement with the Vietnamese community specifically, what you do as a professional today, and some of the related things as it pertains to civic engagement or political engagement. So let's start with Kimberly.
Hello, my name is Kimberly and I am really excited to be here. So thank you, Dan and Vu, for coordinating and facilitating. I guess my short bio or intro is, this is like straight from my Twitter. So I'm the ED of Project Ava. It's a nonprofit. I am a digital marketer by profession, and I'm a perpetual side hustler. So that's probably going to come into the conversation a little. I graduated from Georgetown University in 2014, and I was like highly involved in the VSA there. I would say that I'm probably less involved in the Vietnamese community now than I would like to be, but I love talking about how my Vietnamese identity has led to my political identity as well. So that's about me.
Great. Thanks, Kimberly. Stephen?
Yep.
Yeah, hi. My name's Stephen. I'm in San Francisco. I'm a software developer or developer evangelist, depending on what kind of day it is. Let's see, I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University with a degree in public policy and ethics. And I guess my political involvement has continued since I was able to vote. I've always wanted to volunteer or just be a part of something bigger than me. So I was a volunteer on Obama's 2 campaigns, strong supporter of Bernie Sanders. Right now, I'm in San Francisco, I'm in technology. I'm really trying to look closely about how public policy affects the tech sector. And there's a couple local issues such as homelessness and other progressive issues that I'm keeping close tabs on in San Francisco. Right now, I guess I am an observer of an organization called Pivot, which is the progressive Vietnamese American organization. I'm trying to do work towards progressive Vietnamese American issues. And another one is called Lincoln Network, which is a cross section of people in technology and public policy. So how does public policy affect technology, and how does technology affect public policy? And the best example of that would be healthcare.gov, in which Silicon Valley, I guess, engineers and tech leaders had to come in and save that website from becoming a complete failure. Yeah, so happy to be here. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Stephen. Couple interesting things that you said there, and I just wanted to use that as the starting point for this conversation. You said policy, and you said healthcare. This is an interesting day. The United States House of Representatives today voted for something called the American Health Care Act. Very slim victory, 217 votes to 213 votes. Just give me one word to describe how you're feeling today. Stephen?
Disappointed.
Kimberly, one word.
I don't even have like a word. I have a reaction, and when I read it, my whole like face was just like, ugh. And so I would say disappointed as well. That's kind of how I've been feeling pretty much this entire year. But this has a lot of implications for my family because my parents are insured on the Affordable Care Act. So this is a big deal for me personally. Yeah.
Gotcha. So that's interesting, right? So both of you guys said disappointed. It's something that you care about. Healthcare is a very universal thing, and I want to explore that. I'm going to keep that kind of as a parking lot item. Later on in the conversation, I want to get into this idea of apathy, like why so many young people don't participate is because they don't know how and why it's relevant to them. But let's save that because I think it's going to come and might not be a great place to start. But UNAVSA hosted the Civic Engagement 101 session a few weeks ago, and it was really to introduce young people to this idea of civic engagement. What is it, right? And by and large, we understand that many people who are involved in UNAVSA and VSA are already, to a degree, civically engaged. Wanted to hear from you all what it means to you. Kimberly, I'll start with you.
So I think it kind of breaks down into two levels for me. So the first level is really understanding like civic duty and like what is civic duty. So just like a basic definition, it's the responsibilities and duties of citizens. So as like an American citizen, I have a civic duty of like paying taxes and like doing jury duty, you know, like those are, I would say fairly like passive participation in being a citizen and civic duty. Civic engagement to me is another level beyond that. So it's more as in leveraging your power as a citizen in order to impact and make positive change for your country, like whatever that means to you. So that can be, you know, like remaining aware and like knowing what politicians are doing and like voicing yourself, and also voting, and beyond that, like going to town halls, like talking to politicians, changing laws, volunteering, or like even running for office. So, you know, there's obviously many like levels there in terms of the engagement, right? Like, so in terms of the engagement commitment, but it could mean like all of those things as long as you're leveraging your rights and your power as a citizen.
Great. Stephen?
I guess to put simply, for me, it'd be expressing the needs of people I care about. And I guess I should say I care about all Americans. And where I go with that is like everything we are today is on the backs of the work that other people have done.
Levels for me. So the first level is really understanding like civic duty.
Hey, Jeffrey's able to join us, I think.
community. So just like a basic definition, it's...
Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going?
Hey man, sorry about that, guys. I was kind of stuck. I was watching you guys on YouTube Live there.
Gotcha. Well, we'll let Stephen finish his thought, and then we'll quickly jump to you for a brief intro.
Yeah. Well, I think strongly about like justice. What is the right thing to do? And a lot of times it's not always what's right for myself, but it's what's right for my neighbors. So voicing out for our neighbors, because one day you might be in a position where you have a pre-existing condition, or maybe you're going to be deported, or a friend you know is being deported, and we're all supposed to be in it together. So voicing out your own opinion, organizing, and making that opinion known to your peers and your representatives as a result. So I guess being a part of that team, that is what it means to be an American, or I guess there might be Canadians here, Canadian. So that's what civic engagement is for me, just working for the grand team.
Thanks, Stephen. And Jeffrey, brief introduction from you?
Sure. My name is Jeffrey Vu. I am an aerospace engineer up in Seattle. I've been civically engaged, I would say, since I was pretty young, since I was a teenager, through the influence of some around me, and throughout my college years at VSA. I've always been advocating for Vietnamese American issues and API issues in general. The past few years have definitely been more in tune with things nationally and internationally, and have been focusing on advocacy all around. Advocacy and activism and engagement, and being an active citizen.
Sure. Thanks, Jeffrey. Kimberly, question for you. So for some of us, it's a challenge, or it's been a challenge, kind of focusing on building our own careers, and especially after such so much involvement kind of at the VSA collegiate level. After we get out of college, we just want to focus on our careers. How have you found the time to kind of keep your I guess your eyes and ears on other perspectives or other priorities like civic engagement?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think that I can speak to this as probably one of the younger professionals on the panel today. So I graduated in 2014, about 3 years ago now, and I've been working since then. So it actually took me a little while to figure out how to strike this balance in my life. So the first couple of jobs that I had was all like 100% career development. Like I was putting in crazy hours, just trying to, advance myself. And that was right after, VSA and all of the avenues that I had to engage in college being taken away, and having to like move to a new city and figuring out where are those resources. So for me, it was really tough the first couple of years, and I was not civically engaged then as I could have been. And so for me now, I'm able to do what I am because I found a job that allows me to. So that in itself is like a privilege. And so I work for a smaller agency now, and we do digital marketing. So my hours are very flexible, and my company and the culture here is also more relaxed than I would say in traditional workplaces. And that allows me to have like a work-life balance. So I'm able to do that by setting myself up with the correct job, I guess, that allows me to, is a short answer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Stephen, I guess this next question goes to you. I guess in the age of social media, how should audience members think about how they present themselves online, while at the same time not feeling like they have to mute themselves or censor themselves from speaking out about issues that they're passionate about?
that's a difficult one. Well, one thing I think a lot of people need to learn about social media is that it is a nonstop fire hose of information, and it can very quickly get overwhelming if you try to battle every single post that you disagree with in the comment section. A lot of times it's much better to have discussions with people in person. So if you can use social media as a gateway to having a real and deliberate conversation with someone, I absolutely think that is a great way to use social media such as Facebook and Twitter. Another way is just sharing your thoughts, but not in a way that it's 140 characters, writing a blog post or something, something with a little bit more meat into it. That just doesn't straight up paint one side as evil or one issue as evil or another, but it shows that you're open to what the other side is thinking about it critically, and it would probably win over more minds taking that approach. Like Project Ava is great. Just being able to share long form stories and personal stories like that do more good than just immediately sharing everything you see on Facebook. And I'm not a saint at it. It's something that I actively work on. Just assessing, is this just a reactionary thing I'm feeling right now? Or do I want to take a step back and think more critically about this? Or am I sharing something purely just to bring about awareness that something is happening today? Today's a great example of everyone bringing about awareness of the affordable, the AHCA Act, the repealing Obamacare Act. I think it's much better to have more conversations about it beforehand, more in depth, that invigorate people. Sometimes it's just not the case to be able to do that on social media.
Sure. So Jeffrey, Stephen talked about, being able to share your thoughts in kind of a more longer form posts on social media. He also talked about being able to think critically about issues and talking with your peers about them. With so many different issues and so many different nuances about those issues, how would one go about better informing themselves about those issues, right? There's so much that you can read up on or learn about. How have you managed to do that in your own life?
Being engaged and staying informed has to be like a way of life. Like every time I have a spare moment, I'm always, reading up on what's going on in the world or in my city or, nationally. Like once you realize that, we as activists or as advocates that we have the power to shape our world and have the power to advocate for change, it just becomes like a way of life, and you always have to be engaged, kind of subconsciously almost, because it's something that you care about, and when you care about things, they become a priority for you. On the overwhelming amount of information that you can be bombarded with, so many issues that you care about or that are happening, that terrible things from the war in Syria to what's happening here domestically, it can be overwhelming. You don't have to fight every issue, but it certainly helps to stay informed, and staying informed is as easy as reading in your spare time, and the news sources that you use are very important too. So
do you fall in the hole of reading maybe 5 or 10 articles about the same thing? That's one thing that I'm working on right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I learned the information I need to, but I spend so much more time just reading about it. Like this media consumption is just out of control sometimes, the way the news acts, rather than maybe having a discussion. So I am not good at it, but I try to stop myself from over-reading or over-researching articles.
So I use a news aggregator, and something like Flipboard or like Google News or whatever, and you can choose like your sources, you can choose the topics that you're interested in, and I purposefully included news sources that fall across the spectrum. So, for example, The Economist, New York Times, of course, BBC, internationally even, Der Spiegel, which is the German newspaper, Al Jazeera. Try to include a wide spectrum, so not always getting news off of your friend's Facebook posts.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So we'll go to Kimberly for this next one. So let's talk about voting as a aspect of civic engagement. So I know that in the United States presidential election in 2016, the youth vote, and that's I think 18 to, I forget what the range is, but the youth vote was hovering right around 50%. It hasn't really changed from that. It's generally been pretty bad. In the last Canadian federal election, it was around 57%, but they had a huge bump in youth voter turnout from the previous election. But I think by and large, sub 60%, almost 1 in 2 friends that didn't vote in the election. Want to understand from your perspective why you think that is.
Oh, okay. This is a hardball question. This is actually the question that I had the biggest issue with, but I'm sure we'll touch on this later. And definitely voter apathy and apathy towards civic engagement has something to do with that. So a little bit of background about myself. As a part of Project Ava, I write fairly often about my own experiences as an underrepresented person in the United States. And I actually published an article on the Huffington Post called Overcoming Asian American Apoliticism. So I'm 24 currently, and I voted for the first time in this last election. So when you were talking to me as an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old, I also fell into the demographic. So I guess I understand personally where that apathy comes from. Well, I guess for myself, I can't speak for the entire community, but yeah, so, it's certainly not an easy fix. And I think that was part of the question, is that if it was an easy fix, then it would have been fixed already. So I think part of the issue is the overwhelming information, like Stephen and Jeff were talking about, is that if you yourself come from a family who, is not aware or doesn't have the resources to be aware of the politics of the country that you're in, and for myself as a 1.5 generation Vietnamese American, my parents do not know what's going on in politics, and they're certainly older Vietnamese generation in that generation who do and are very engaged, and that's awesome. But I feel like that is also the minority from what I experienced growing up. So not having that be a part of my culture, it was really difficult for me to understand and integrate myself into the conversations that my peers were having. So when they were talking about this policy that, I actually grew up in the DC metro area, so a lot of my friends' parents worked in the government, and that's their dinner table conversation. And my parents work in a nail salon, so their dinner conversations are very different. So I think lack of information, and yeah, so lack of information. I also think that for younger people, we are still trying to form our identities, and that also includes political identity. So, my parents are very conservative. I don't know if anyone else on this panel had conservative Republican family. Yeah, but for me, growing up, that was all the opinion that I got. And in my head, I just didn't have the context to really challenge that. And now as I'm slowly becoming my own adult and being a very progressive adult, I'm starting to solidify that identity a little bit more. So for young people, it's such a challenge in voting because you feel like when you vote, you have a stamp, this is me now. And for myself as a younger person, I was reluctant at times putting that stamp on myself. So it's a complex situation, and I'm happy to hear anyone else's thoughts too.
Jeffrey or Stephen, you guys have anything to add?
I think what kept me involved was probably U.S. history and my group of friends in high school. Voting was a social thing. Like, if you talk about it, like, hey, did you vote today? Why not? Like, as a group of friends, we would talk about the issues. My parents were also conservative, and I agree. I formed my identity as I got into my 20s, my mid-20s, rather than having immediately out the door know what the difference of Republican and a Democrat was and where I stood on that. It did help that I was comfortable challenging my parents' opinions often, and that we didn't have, like, my parents haven't disowned me to this point, despite working for the campaign against what they see as the devil. So having good, just practicing that discourse with your parents is good. Questioning that and doing so in a way that they don't throw you out of the house for questioning, you know, healthcare policy with them or tax policy. Obviously, they have a lot more history in terms of politics and how it's affected them, and you have to keep that in mind with your own parents. But with apathy, I mean, I try to encourage all my friends to vote, ideally. Mark that on your calendar. You can make it a friendly activity, mail them a mail order ballot. But apathy with the younger generation right now, I'm turning 30, so I feel a little bit removed to that feeling of apathy now. So it's hard for me to distinctly remember what made me so apathetic or my peers.
So one follow-up question, Stephen. So you mentioned having a dialogue with your parents has been helpful for you. I imagine that the language barrier has been a challenge. What strategies have you employed to ensure that you can articulate your views in a way that's, I guess, more representative of how you feel, rather than very basic level positions?
My Vietnamese is okay. Being able to connect the dots with them to something that's relatable to them was definitely absolutely necessary. At first, connect like policy to how it might affect them. Otherwise, my parents wouldn't care about, I don't know, Middle East policy necessarily, unless they know how it relates to them, or they'll only care about tax policy as it relates to their small business or something like that. So pick that out, and then slowly walk through the issue from a non-combative standpoint. Like, try to draw some clear, like, hey, if taxes go up, what happens to your business? Taxes go down, and then start drawing the connections and dots there. And then once you get into the heated parts, that's where it becomes dicey. But at the very least, you guys have an understanding of some of the basic issues and where you stand on how the world works with your parents, with my parents, definitely. And at the end of the day, realizing that you and your parents aren't going to change the world, so you don't have to disown your own parents, or they don't have to disown you, or it's okay to back off if it gets too heated, come back to it maybe later on, or try to approach it from another angle. There's a lot of nights where I've had to breathe slowly and then just try again for another day. Yeah, but it's you have to learn a lot of patience with maybe not even just your family, maybe some of your peers now, especially in the era of fake news and everything that's being pushed around. You might have to breathe really slowly and work with people to try to bring them to the other side. If not, you can do what most people do, is block them, which doesn't help the country, I think, at all.
I'll add something really quick about views or who are apathetic. It's not always, like you mentioned, not always the best to go after them on their views, because, you know, when you go after someone, they immediately put up a wall, regardless of the merits of the conversation or the argument. I think one of the only things that you can really do is show someone why you care about something, and maybe slowly they will come to you. So.
Sure. Jeffrey,
Yeah.
we'll go ahead, Kimberly.
Okay, I actually had something to add to Stephen's point when he was talking about talking to your parents and trying to break things down into something that they understand. So I actually had this very recently with my parents where we were talking, I think we were having a conversation about food stamps. And, you know, my parents being like very conservative and traditional, you know, vying into this whole like, oh, we as a community like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Like, and I don't know, like as we all know, there's a lot of anti-Blackness within the Vietnamese community as well, like as the broader AAPI community. So my mom made this comment that was like, oh, like Black people are lazy and that's why they live in the slums and that's why they like need food stamps. And I actually took it back a step and I was like, well, actually, like the reason that Black people live in these neighborhoods or in the ghettos is because, you know, redlining and all of these like Jim Crow era laws that, of course, my parents, being immigrants and not knowing the history of the United States, like don't understand that. But, you know, my parents also for themselves, we lived in subsidized housing, like, you know, when we were younger. And then because they were able to get a house loan is how we were able to move out of like the neighborhood that we were in. And so I asked my parents, I was like, well, if you were kept, like if housing discrimination kept you from getting a house loan, where would we be? And I think that that was a teaching moment for them to realize that they might not know everything. So just kind of exactly what Stephen said, like bringing it back to how does this relate to you? And like, how can like you see parallels? So I think a lot of the apathy also comes from people not understanding that like, you know, civic engagement and like politics like affects you, like it affects your family, it affects your friends. So people thinking it's like, oh, this doesn't matter. Like whoever the president is doesn't affect me. That's really misguided.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Yep.
So Jeffrey, back to you. So Kimberly said something along the lines of, you know, we really have to position the issues to something that someone will understand, something more tangible, right? And so something related to that I've always been thinking about is, you know, we have a lot of UVSA, UNAVSA leaders that are in this kind of UNAVSA ecosystem, and you know, some of the things that they've been trying to do is promote more civic engagement. But even the word civic engagement, it's not exciting. It's not fun. It's not
sexy.
It's not sexy. So my question to you is, how do we as UNAVSA, UVSA, VSA leaders brand civic engagement and political engagement differently so that more people are interested in it?
It's about having our voice at the table. If we as a community are not civically engaged, we as a community will not be heard at all, right? We're not going to have a voice at the table making decisions. You know, having that type of power, even if it's just at a state district level, it dictates how you know, all the policies that are going to affect you. I don't know, for me, what I saw that was started to become pretty exciting is there's this new energy for young people to run for office, or for people from, you know, advocating for people from our community to run for office. I've seen a lot of energy behind that, and I think that's something that young people would get excited about. Like I don't think people realize that a chance to be elected somewhere, you know, unless you're in Orange County or something. But you know, you're seeing that, yeah, we actually do have a chance. We can actually, it's actually possible to be elected to a national office like Stephanie Murphy, or there's Kathy Tran running for office in
Virginia.
Virginia, that's right. And multiple others as well. And there's the mayor of Milpitas, California, mayor in a city near Silicon Valley. He's Vietnamese American. He's like 33 years old. I read his articles. He used to be a former sneakerhead, hip hop head. Someone just like us is a mayor of a city in Silicon Valley. So we actually, you know, we need to communicate that there absolutely is opportunity for us to have a seat at the table, and it takes work to get there.
Sure. Wanted to check in with Vu very quickly. I know we wanted to leave the last 15 minutes for some questions. Is that still the plan?
Sorry, I have multiple devices, so it's hard to figure out which one. Yes, so 15 minutes prior to the end of our webinar, we'll open up the floor for audience questions, and then we'll wrap up 5 minutes before the call ends for just general announcements. So yeah, feel free to leave any questions on our Facebook event page or on the sidebar chat on the YouTube live channel.
Great. So I'm going to slide in just more rapid fire questions for the third. Right? So let's start with, if resources, that's money, time, labor, were not an issue, in what ways would you change, in what ways would you empower the community or youth in the community? Kind of a creative out-of-the-box question. Jeffrey, let's start with you.
Running for office, supporting somebody's campaign, full-out operation. That's how I would want to use the money. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Kimberly?
So for me, I'm all about like media and media creation, and that's really what Project Ava is about. So if I had money, time, everything, I would really create a lot of media that empowers youth in the conversation. So it either be like a podcast or a video series that has interesting youth doing cool stuff in the community, just coming on and talking about like politics and like using the language that we use. That's my way of empowering youth in politics.
All right. Stephen?
If resources weren't a barrier?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, that's such a hypothetical.
Hey, you never know. There might be somebody watching right now with very deep pockets. Just let us know what you do.
I would say like making sure the youth there are no barriers for the youth to explore the nonprofits and like the organizations events, like bust them out to a protest just so they can see. They don't have to participate, or maybe a politician's speech just to hear what they're shouting about on the stump or something like that. So to enable, I guess, students to really get a nice broad spectrum of what exists out there early on, because you never know what is actually going to really hook them in. So as much as I could, I would almost like let them tour civic engagement a little bit, give them all the resources so that it doesn't become a burden upon them. Maybe I would just—
So Stephen,
we do that. Because some of them are probably broke students to begin with. So hey, like go to some of these events and we'll give you a scholarship or something like that.
So staying with you, Stephen, if you only had 30 minutes a day to focus on some civic engagement, political engagement activities, how would you spend that time?
I would spend 15 minutes rapid fire reading all the issues I could, and then another 15 telling anyone I know about it, or telling them to read about it, if anything. Like, I care about this. And then,
all right, Kimberly?
So I actually do this every day. When I commute to work, I listen to podcasts. So I'll probably post some podcasts that I think everyone should listen to, but it's a really passive way to get informed. So that's what I would do for 30 if I only had 30 minutes in the day. And then what Stephen said afterwards, I'd probably like gossip with my friends about it. Like when people are talking about like keeping up with the Kardashians, I'll be like, did you see what Paul Ryan like? So that's me.
So one quick comment about podcasts. Audio is still really the only medium that you can multitask, right? Like it's a really interesting point. Jeffrey, question to you. Same question to you.
Sure. I would spend 20 minutes reading up on issues. That's what I usually do every day. And then 10 minutes texting my friends or texting people in my community to organize.
Great. One last rapid fire question. For all the people watching today, as they leave this session, what's one tangible thing that they could do to kind of level up their civic engagement game? What would you recommend? Jeffrey, I'll start with you.
Understanding that you do have the power to make change. Sometimes you feel like just a drop in the ocean, but once you understand that your actions can very much have a real world effect, I think it will help you understand why it's so important to be civically engaged.
Stephen?
Try to actually have a discussion with somebody. Recognize that you probably aren't having discussions with people if you're just sharing stuff on Facebook. And really try to have maybe 5 or 10 minutes of a conversation with anyone. It doesn't have to destroy your day, but just push towards that.
All right. Kimberly?
So I would say that everyone watching right now, whatever social media platform you use, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, find who your representative is and follow them. So that's what I've done for my state, and it's just a way to get the news like right into the feed where I already am. So yeah, look up your person on Twitter and just follow them. It's very basic, and then you get all the information, not all the information, but a lot of the information that you'll need to get started.
Gotcha. Great. Vu, any questions for the panelists?
Yeah, well, first off, before I go into audience questions, I want to thank you all for making it on. I know it's been, kind of like a bit bothersome in the beginning, trying to get everything situated technically. But yeah, I appreciate the time and effort that you all put into this presentation. And hopefully we can have it again in the future as well. But let's go to the YouTube Live chat on the sidebar, and the first question is from user Caltron. How do you engage with members of your community who are apathetic or feel pessimistic about politics?
I guess I can start because I have a thought about this. I would say be a role model. So I believe Jeff or Stephen, one of you guys said this already, but you can really lead by example. I'm not like the type to like go out and like harass people. So I'm not the type to like, I don't know, being like, oh, like shame on you, like why didn't you come to this rally? But I feel like if I can be a leader by showing that like, hey, like, I can do this and you can too, that might be a way to help people break out of their shell.
Just to add to that, we recently asked this question of the author T. Boyd, who visited Seattle. She wrote the graphic novel that just came out, and she said, "Be like water. You can't when you're confrontational. You're not going to bring people closer to you. But if you're like water, where you're every day, introduce new ideas to them, show them why you care." Eventually, it may fade away that hard exterior. So that was her advice.
My roommate was a little apathetic towards the issues that I cared about, so it took me a while to find out what he really cared about. So having some patience and just learning about the other person, why are they apathetic, and ideally, hopefully, you find something that they care about that you can talk about.
Okay, awesome. Next is from Mary Ta. Her question is, if you had to choose, which do you think is better, quote unquote, using your energy to work / link up with like-minded, engaged people who are eager to act, or trying to find apathetic people and persuade them to act? Let's start with Stephen. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with this one. I think you have to have a very strong stomach if you're going to only go after apathetic people. A really super optimistic mindset, and level your expectations of your results, because it could just be apathetic for the next 2 years. Who knows? I would rather go with optimistic people who are engaged, because there's a positive reinforcement factor there. You can build off of their energy, they build off of your energy. You can rope more people in. It's like a snowball going down a mountain, that analogy. So I would always want to surround myself with people that provide more energy and optimism into my life.
I would say, you can do both. When it comes to getting work done, you have to be surrounded with people who are eager to act. But that doesn't mean that just simply being around people of different views isn't just as important. It is very important, just as important as the action that you take with your friends. But like we talked about earlier, I would say it's not going after apathetic people, but being a shining example on the hill, and maybe they'll come around to you.
Yeah, I have really nothing more to add on to that. I would agree with Jeff that it's kind of like what you're feeling at the time. So if you just have all of this energy, then, you know, talk to some apathetic people and try to figure it out. And if you're in a mood for taking action, then surround yourself with the people who do as well. I think both are important, and it's kind of like a two-way like system. Like everyone has to work together to make change.
Yeah, and might I add, and this wasn't really part of the original question, but if you think about people in like a bell curve, right? You got people on the left that are very gung-ho, very proactive, are gonna go get it. You have people on the right that just like are not quite there yet. You do have like a large cross-section of people in the middle here that do care. They just don't know exactly how to act or like what to do next. Those are the people I think you focus your energy on, because you can move them from that middle to act.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, great. Another question from our YouTube channel is, going off of the social media question earlier, are there spaces you recommend for me to join where I can safely feel I can share my views or opinions, even if I have opposing viewpoints?
I can, I guess, speak to this a little. So I'm a part of a handful of different communities on Facebook that are like private groups for like women of color or for like Asian American women, even where we have like this constructive dialogue about different issues that impact that community. So me with my multiple like intersectional identities, I can like traverse from one group to another and understand that everyone in that group wants to work towards the same change that I do, just trying to understand like how do we get there. So it's really important, I guess, when you're finding safe spaces to find somewhere where there are some ground rules, and you know, safe spaces can become unsafe even, but you as like VSA members can also create those safe spaces in person in your own communities as well. So I think for me, I feel most comfortable in groups of like 2 to 3 people where we're just sitting around like, you know, having dinner or having like wine or something where people can ask like questions or just be like, oh, like you're talking about this new policy, I don't know about it. Can you like share more? Those are 2 areas that I see safe spaces being really valuable.
In Seattle, after the first immigration ban, Muslim ban, we ended up creating a group called Viets Who Give a Shit. And the group exists now in DC as well, but it's grown to over like 200, 300 people, and we've been meeting in person, you know, every month or so, every couple of months, and meeting people in person to talk about issues that matter to you and to them as well. Meeting people in person, absolutely. So.
I have nothing to add to that. Echoing, I've heard of Viets Who Give a Shit, and I just wish there was one in NorCal. Maybe I'll start one.
You gotta start it, man. You gotta start it.
Okay, so oh, sorry. Did anyone have anything?
Like sometimes the issues that I care about don't necessarily in these people specific, which is why I'm a part of this thing called the Lincoln Network, where we can complain about policy and tech. There's a group that exists out there for whatever you care about, probably. So if you're working in another field and you care about the policies that affect that, I encourage you to definitely take the time to explore, because you might find something really amazing out there. Yeah.
Okay, great. So one final question, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. So a question from Lee Win is, media sources present a lot of bias depending on their interests, left and right. What tips do you have to make sure that what you're reading, when you're hearing the news, that you have all the facts and perspectives and be able to think critically without perhaps being overwhelmed by them?
I would say you have to read, and I don't always, of course, not everyone can always do this, but read multiple articles from different sources on the same issue, on the same topic. It does take a little bit of research to make sure that you're not reading, you're reading a reputable source, international and national. And I would say that it takes practice to kind of filter out what's an opinion and what is a recorded fact. So yeah, like everything, it takes practice, and you just got to make it a habit to read multiple sources.
Yes, so I actually have run into issues with this myself, and so I have a background in linguistics, which kind of makes me probably a little different than a lot of people watching. But looking at the language that they use and like how they say things. So even when you read a headline, the language that they use will reveal the bias. So that, and then you start to train yourself in being like, hey, I saw like this headline 3 times from the Huffington Post. They must be biased in this way. And so, yeah, I think having context and understanding that, being critical about the language that you're reading and what it's making you feel. Because a lot of these articles, they're designed to make you feel a certain way. And I think one other thing is understanding the difference between like liberal and progressive. And so like those 2 words are different, and just doing some checking, background check will help you try to decipher what message it is that you're being delivered. So.
All right. Well, I want to kind of wrap this up, starting with thanking all of our panelists for taking their time, sharing your wisdom and insights. I think it's been invaluable for me. Hopefully it's been invaluable for the participants or the audience. Wanted to also say that I really am proud of UNAVSA, the VSA community, for kind of putting civic engagement at the forefront of their work. As we all have invested a lot of time in this community, we understand that we're trying to build leaders that will go on to become stewards of the Vietnamese community, and having these civic engagement skills and having these political engagement skills are so fundamental in doing that. And so it's a proud moment. I appreciate all the organizers and everyone kind of standing behind this effort. And thank you all. I don't know, panelists, if you have any last words.
My last word is UNAVSA and VSA and this whole network of us. When it comes time to take action, we can rely on this network. So.
Great. And I believe that we're all on social media. Please feel free to connect with us, ask questions, engage with us. We'd be happy to continue the conversation long after this call is over.
Yes, so our webinar is ending, but feel free to continue the conversation on our Facebook event live. Civic engagement never dies. It's always around. So we would love to have the conversation moved over to our social media platform, and let us know what you think about tonight and what other tips you can provide that haven't been, spoken on tonight. So thank you all again, and have a good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Night.